Cops of Reddit. What's the most suspicious thing you've ever caught somebody doing for a totally legitimate reason? Story 1. I know I'm kind of late here and it's another I'm not a cop but kind of situation, but I'm kind of hoping this cop uses Reddit and we'll see this. One night I was coming home from a friend's house. It was like 1 or 2 a.m. And their house is known for a bit of partying, and this was a relatively rural area, so cops don't have much to do. I hadn't been drinking or anything that night, and there wasn't a party, so as I'm driving home down the windy back roads, I hit a skunk. Well, I didn't hit it. It went basically right under my car, and I heard a bit of noise. I keep driving, but after about 5 or 6 minutes, my AC starts popping out the worst smell you've ever smelled. I know it's a skunk. I'm only like 10 minutes from home, so I try to stick it out. I roll down the windows and kind of stick my head out Ace Ventura style. It's not working. The smell is overwhelming. Now I have to vomit. I pull over, put my hazards on, and start puking on the side of the road. After a minute or so, a cop pulls up and puts his lights on, and I'm still vomiting. He gets out and sees this mid-20s dude with tattoos and a nose ring puking. As he's walking towards me, he starts saying, well, looks like maybe someone had a bit too much to drink tonight. Oh, Jesus Christ, what the hell? As he's walking by my car, you can smell the skunk. He starts dry heaving and pukes a little bit while through my vomiting, I'm saying, I hit a skunk, I think, hurl, it's stuck in the undercarriage. I both kind of just backed off until we could talk again, and then he helped me poke the skunk off the bottom of my car while we both dry heaved, using his extendable baton. Nightstick? Do we still call it that? I don't know. Then once it was off, he just kind of nodded and was like, all right, good luck, kid, and got in his car. We both seemed pretty embarrassed. Whoever you were, I'm sorry you didn't get the easy arrest you thought you had, but thank you for helping me get that skunk off of my car. Story 2. Son of a cop. My dad told me about a time back in the 80s. My father was sitting in his cruiser around the corner from a bar. A car drives by, swerving a little with exhaust coming from the tailpipe, signifying a recently started vehicle. Pulls the guy over, smells alcohol on the driver while also noticing a large staff in the back seat. He has the driver step out, then inquires about the staff. The driver tells my dad, I'm a black belt in Kung Fu, I use it in class. So my father, unconvinced, asked him to demonstrate his proficiency with the staff while proving his sobriety in a sort of impromptu field sobriety test. The driver puts on a little show for my dad on the side of the road. Dad's enjoying the show but starts to hear sirens coming from all directions. Passerby had seen my dad on the side of the road in a face-off with a crazy man and a stick. Thinking my dad was in need of help, the passerby called the cops. Apparently my dad had been so wrapped up in the show, he hadn't heard the radio calls for him, so dispatch sent all available units to his rescue. Passerby thought my dad was getting his ass kicked by a ninja. Story 3. It was Brussels sprouts. I'm the guy who was doing something suspicious, but it kind of fits here. When I used to work at a grocery store, I would get off sometime between 10 p.m. and 12 a.m., and I also preferred to ride my bike most of the year to save on gas. Since work was close to my house and there were few cars out, I never really bothered with lights. Already suspicious, I know. Right around Thanksgiving, we would get in these massive stalks of Brussels sprouts, which, if you've ever seen one, they look like something you might find growing on an alien planet. A solid 3 feet of little bulbs at the end of spikes, basically. They were so super cheap that I couldn't pass up such a deal, but of course, the only way for me to transport it at home at night was to ride with the stalk sticking out a foot out of my backpack. I have no idea what the cops thought it was when they pulled me over. A weapon? I don't know. They were doing their deal where one talked to me and the other checks me out from behind when the one behind me busted out laughing. Are those Brussels sprouts? They let me go a minute later. Story 4. Police thought I murdered my ex-girlfriend and was running a candy factory in my home. I'm the suspect in this situation. I lived in a large town in the south of the UK in my own terraced house. Outside of my house was a bus stop, so I had a few people who would go by outside each day, but it wasn't in the heart of the high street. I'd suffered from cluster flies for a few days and they came out of nowhere. We're talking maybe 50 or so, which is a little alarming, but there was nowhere I could see they were coming from. I got rid of them as quickly as they came about and went about my day as normal. One day in the weekend, I had a knock at the door with riot police who stated they believed that someone had died on the property and they were able to enter under an emergency act of law without a warrant. In their wisdom, they spoke to the neighbors who lived here after a report from an elderly lady visiting the bus stop. The neighbors mentioned my ex-girlfriend who they didn't see for months. We broke up and she moved out, but the police put the flies report and this fact together as me being a kid. The police were sure I had something to hide as they instantly didn't believe I owned the house. I work in IT, so I make good money and I'm thankful I saved hard to get on the housing ladder, but they weren't having any of it. I had to then wait under surveillance while my house was searched and riot police were all over the street. Now, I'm a keen gardener, and upstairs in the airing cupboard, I was attempting to grow some from seeds. The police were convinced that 23-year-old me was instead running a cat factory. In the end, they found no dead body, and they realized their mistake when I pointed out the 50 cacti around the house they conveniently didn't notice. I'm sure I'm on some kind of list now, but they left almost disappointed that their amazing detective work found an IT-ner that likes spiny flora and not the next serial killer. Story 5. Police officer here. Long story short, the guy gets locked out of his house by his wife, and we catch him trying to get back into his house. It was just after midnight, and we got a call about a suspicious person looking into a home. We respond to code 2, lights, no sirens, and switch off the lights before we get close to masking our approach. As we pull up to the house, we see no signs of anyone at the front of the house, so we walk around the rear and bam, the guy with the crowbar wrenching on the back door. I yell, "Police, drop the crowbar!" The dude starts screaming and nearly crying because we scared him so badly. Turns out he went to Tim Hortons to get a coffee as he and his wife had a few drinks and he forgot his keys and cell phone in the house. She was so drunk she forgot that she left him out there and locked the doors like she does every night. Poor tried to wake up his wife and she was passed out and didn't hear him. He grabbed a crowbar from his shed to try to pop the locking mechanism out and we caught him. We managed to get a hold of her by calling her on my cell. When she answered the door, she admitted to accidentally locking him out and gave us the exact sequence of events. I honestly wish we had body cams so we could replay the poor face in a high-pitched scream. Our service does not have tasers. We train constantly in advanced hand-to-hand tactics. We are getting tasers soon, though. Our hands were on our guns, but after yelling the challenge and hearing him scream and drop the crowbar, we de-escalated the situation completely. When you hear a door being wrenched on, you know there may be an improvised weapon involved. Hence, for officer safety, we were ready should he charge us. Story 6. My cousin is a cop and told us the story of seeing a car driving slowly at about 3 a.m. through a neighborhood that had several break-ins. He thinks to himself that they're looking for a target, so he puts on his lights and pulls them over. He walks up and the driver puts the window down and she turns to look at him with fire in her eyes and says in a harsh whisper, "This had better be important because I just got the baby to sleep." He looks in the back and there's a baby in a car seat, sound asleep. The memory of what it was like when his babies wouldn't sleep rushes back and he says, "Oh no, I'm so sorry, never mind," and goes back to his car. She drives away slowly. He's just glad he didn't wake the baby. Story 7. Recently, I was conducting an S18 house search on a guy we'd arrested in a local club with loads of drugs on him. In his room, I found an oversized, out-of-place vase with false flowers in them, suspicion raised. I took the flowers out, and at the bottom, I saw what I believed to be a balaclava. Here we go. I took it out, unfolded it, and it turned out to be a jumper for a small dog. I look in the vase again, I see a blue velvet drawstring bag. I manipulate it slightly, and it rustles with the feeling of lots of little packets inside. I remove it slowly, open the bag, and inside are some retro Scrabble pieces. The hell? We didn't find any further drugs in his room. We did, however, find a big hell-off-sized machete under his mattress wrapped up in a tea towel, so that was interesting. Still confused as hell about the contents of that vase, though. Story 8. That's easy. I'm a campus police officer and I was working the overnight shift. This, of course, means patrolling the parking lots, and from time to time you find people parked in dark spots doing various things. At the night, I turn a corner and see a car in an empty lot, so I drive up to it. As my lights pass over it, I see a guy sitting in the passenger seat, leaning back, head laid back and mouth open, and then I see what looks like a human head bobbing up and down in front of him. I've seen this before, and I'm thinking someone is having a good time. Nope. Turns out it's a guy from out of state who has a kid who goes to my college and was set to graduate the next day. The head is one of the balloons he bought for her at a nearby truck stop. He was asleep and left the air on and it got caught in an air current in front of him, thus bobbing up and down. I woke him up to check on him and eventually told him what it initially looked like. His only reply was, "Yeah, I wish." Story 9. Prior U.S. Coast Guard. We were doing a security boarding on a vessel planning on entering the port with some hazardous cargo. Me and one other guy are in the engine room making sure everything is kosher when we catch a glimpse of some boots barely sticking out from under a piece of machinery. Since, as far as we knew, all crew were present and accounted for above deck, we were understandably concerned. We radio up asking about it, get told all present and accounted for up above, so we're thinking stowaway or someone being smuggled. Luckily, it was neither, just a dude who legit fell asleep while doing some maintenance. He shared a name with one of the other crew, so that's how we missed his absence. Apparently they, our guy up above, checked the same guy twice. Go fig. Story 10. At around 2 a.m. on a weeknight, I see a guy bolt from a house in a quiet residential burglary hotspot. His face is covered, he's wearing sunglasses or something similar, and the kind of dark clothing you catch burglars in. As I follow him and start to shout up on the radio, the cars parked between us clear up to reveal he's running on a leash behind the tiniest dog I've ever seen, a clearly uncontrollable pooch that's having the time of its life. I just kept going. The dog was on a leash, and he was stopping to sniff at some lampposts. It wasn't dog napping. The man was running as he was trying to keep up with the dog while letting it go at the pace it wanted to. He ran from the house, but the front door was closed. The dog took off when they hit the pavement. When I got a closer look, the glasses were tinted, not sunglasses. I don't know why he had his face covered. It was a scarf and it was autumn, but we don't have sumptuary laws in our country and you can wear what you like. I'm not the fashion police. I spoke to him when I saw him later on, but I don't remember the dog's name. Sorry. It wasn't an expensive dog. It was a cheap dog. Cheap dogs have more fun, I reckon. Story 11. Cop here. Well, technically military, really. I'm an officer with the Portuguese National Republican Guard, similar to the French gendarmes. We're generally responsible for policing rural, low-population areas, though we do also take on some military and expeditionary roles like our peacekeeping presence in Timor. The point is, if you live in rural Portugal, we're the ones who are going to come when you need help or have trouble. So about 2 years ago, there was a murder. The old man was stabbed and bled out in his kitchen. The wife came home to find him dead lying on the counter. She called 112, 911 equivalent, and I was dispatched along with some colleagues. Paramedics confirmed the death on site, but we don't want to move the body before the judiciary police could have a look and do forensics. Not only that, but the old lady wasn't doing so well with the shock, so after about 20 minutes of her hyperventilating, we got her in the ambulance and paramedics took her to the hospital. That means me and my colleague were left guarding the body and trying to keep things as we found them while still looking around for evidence. About an hour later, we hear a truck arrive. My colleague goes up from the basement where we were, but I stay longer to have a better look around. Come back up 10 minutes later to find the body gone. I look outside and see two guys shoving it into the back of a nondescriptive refrigerated truck. I come out running and yelling with my gun out, thinking the murderer was back and trying to cover their tracks. My colleague steps out from behind the truck. Turns out the morgue's vehicle was broken and they were using a rental to transport the bodies. The two guys I saw were morgue workers just putting the body in the truck to carry it to the morgue, while my colleague was talking with the third. The judiciary police only came about 2 hours later. Story 12. The funniest story of mine about this stuff, years and years ago. Okay, several decades ago, so I'm old, sue me. Guy was arrested for arson. A neighbor in a subdivision backing up to the farm saw him methodically move all the valuables out of the barn over a period of a week, then closely mowed the hayfields for about 50 yards radius all around the barn. He was puzzling over the mowing when he noticed the farmer walk all around the barn, pouring something from a blue gas can right at the bottom of the barn walls. The neighbor looks away for less than a minute, and when he looks back, the barn is fully engulfed in flames. He calls the fire department and reports the farmer has set his barn on fire with gas or something. The fire department is on scene in about 5 minutes and reports the barn is already beyond saving. They do smell diesel fuel. A quick investigation says it's arson. The field is mowed to prevent spread. The burned barn has nothing much in it, but the other barn and shed overhang has a lot of stuff recently placed with grass underneath still green. Definite marks of petroleum accelerant. They arrest the farmer on the spot. He says nothing. The farmer refuses to talk to the DA and asks for his lawyer. I'm on the jury where the prosecution states they will prove the farmer set his own barn on fire. Barn was insured and insurance fraud was the motive. They call all the expected witnesses. The neighbor played the 911 call, interview with firemen who smelled fuel and saw marks of accelerant on the ground, etc. The defense does no cross-examination at all. The prosecution is done, and now it's the defense's turn. The defense calls the farmer, and the first question asked is, let's cut to the chase. Did you burn your barn down? Yep. Why did you do it? It was old and rotten with termites. Going to fall down. Not safe. Have you always burned down old farm buildings? Yep, and my daddy did before me. It's a farm. Are you aware that you need a permit to burn debris in this county? Been doing it like that on this farm since we had dangerous engines. Never had any permit. The fine is up to $50. Oh wait, I forgot. You've zoned active agriculture and are exempt. No permit is needed. But why didn't you tell any of this to the police? They didn't ask till after they put handcuffs on me and took me to the police station. They told me anything I said would be used against me and said I had the right to remain silent, and then some lawyer guy came in and told me I was going to prison for insurance fraud. I remember Perry Mason said, don't talk to anyone but your lawyer, so I didn't. Did you file an insurance claim? What for? The barn wasn't worth anything in the state and I moved all the stuff out. I suggested we try to talk them out of this. You said you wanted your day in court. What's up with that? They came on my land, arrested me without telling me what for, told me later it was for arson and insurance fraud and put that in the newspapers. All my friends, relatives, and neighbors know about this. They made me look dishonest. I want to make sure everyone knows the real facts. I figure this is better than them just dropping it and everyone wondering whether they just decided not to send an old man to prison. Defense rests. It was epic. The jury was sent out of the room and after a few minutes told the case was over and to go back to the waiting room in case we were needed for the next trial. It's my understanding they dropped the case. Story 13. I was on the bus commuting to my university and began to feel extremely bloated, so I decided to get off. Turns out it was a relatively good move because as soon as I got off the bus, I began furiously crapping myself. And I mean like full-on blasting diarrhea. Of course, it didn't really help me avoid crapping myself, but it helped me not embarrass myself by turning the bus into an bomb that day. I didn't give the full story as what happened thereafter was probably even more embarrassing than pooping myself. Anyway, after the story above happened, I found myself in the middle of downtown area of my city, a place with which I was not familiar. However, luckily I had my phone, so I turned on my location and tried to figure out where I was. Thankfully, I found out that I was really close to the Natural History Museum that I visited quite frequently. So I get there and decide to stand on the side of the building where there is a small round area with stone benches. I call my parents and after having a few laughs, they agree to pick me up. However, I'm like 45 minutes away from my house, so it's going to take a while. What I didn't expect is that people were frequently walking past me. Apparently, they found me suspicious. They apparently couldn't smell the radiating stench of poop filling the area and decided to inform the cops that I was there, who said people thought I was waiting for a drug deal. This forced me to admit that I did indeed crap my pants, and after they came closer, I think they realized it and didn't want to go towards the front of the museum where there were a lot of people. Needless to say, I was embarrassed. The cop politely asked if I needed a ride home or a phone to call someone on, and I assured them that someone was coming to get me, and they left. And there you have it, the most embarrassing moment of my life. Story 14. Not a cop, but I am reminded of a story. When he was 16 or so, my brother and his friends would do some absolutely stupid things. One day, they were walking through the local grocery store and saw that cases of teenies, also called hugs, lil jugs, and quarter waters, were on sale at a huge discount. They decided to have a teenies drinking contest and bought several cases. So there they are in the parking lot of a Stop and Shop. They have the cases stacked in the open trunk of a car and have formed into a circle where they are now cheering the combatants on as two people at a time try to chug the most teenies in a 2-minute match. Kids two-fisting teeny jugs, breaking foil caps and pounding these juices and then crushing the plastic jugs on their foreheads and throwing them on the ground and going for the next juice. And during this idiocy, a cop car pulls up. The cop gets out and sees a group of teenage boys crushing plastic jugs of something, screaming like idiots. Several kids have puked red and purple colored liquid on the parking lot. He obviously thinks they have booze and starts giving them the riot act. At this point, the officer is informed that the kids have no booze on them, that all they have is juice, and that they were all overcome with thirst. The police officer eventually realized they were telling the sort of truth and ordered them to all clean up their mess and then head home. Story 15. I was on the other side of it. I was driving around my neighborhood at around 11 p.m., really slow looking for my lost doggo. I'd worked the next day, so I went home and went to bed. About 30 minutes later, 5 cop cars pull up at the house and asked to speak to me. So naturally, I'm pissed and asked why they're there. She said we had multiple cars about your car driving slowly through the neighborhood, blah, 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 blah. Let me tell you, so is that illegal? Was not the right thing to say. The cop gets super mad and goes on and on about how suspicious it was. Finally, I told her I was looking for my dog and she said, "Oh," and turns around and walks away. It was silly. Am I really going to scope out houses down the street from where I live? The dog came back the next morning, happy and full of trash. She is a lab who eats everything.